of the things that you talked about is that very often the kind of exposure we get to diversity and inclusion theories actually has the opposite effect. It doesn't really help bring us together. Maybe you could elaborate on that a bit.
Yeah, so it's a very interesting term, and I see that now in the work that I do. You know, as I mentioned, I fell into sort of DEI space just naturally, but sort of thinking about creating value, creating that sense of community. Now I see it's become more of a thing, and it's actually can be divisive in the way it's done. So for me, ultimately, you know, what is diversity? It's all of us. It's the way you think. It's the way you do things. It's who we are. And it's, if you are in a company, it's the clients that you serve. Is it a diverse client base? Is that, you know, are you serving them the best you can? How are you serving them? Like, do you have thought leaders that represent who you're trying to support? So that in itself is the diversity there. For me, the inclusion piece is ultimately, do people feel valued? Do they feel like they belong? You know, there was research done by Career Builder some years ago, and follow up actually by Harvard Business Review, that 79% of people, when they leave the workforce, the reason is because they don't feel valued. The belief is, oh, is it because of pay? Is it because of promotion? Is it some sort of unhappiness? Ultimately, what is that unhappiness? If you feel valued, if you feel this is your place, like you belong, that what you say counts, you make a difference, you're going to stay. Mm-hmm. You know, a lot of the times I felt it myself in the corporate world, and you know, you are doing things that isn't relevant to anything you've done in your degree whatsoever. But, you know, it's the people that surround you. Do you get along with them? It's a team, you know. Do you feel like what you say counts? Do people even listen to you? That's the reason you're there day in, day out. You feel, you know, it drives you. But if you don't feel that level of drivenness, if you don't feel that level, something is going to make you leave. And it could be little things, Rita, that, you know, you walk into a room, you're about to meet your boss, you have a meeting scheduled, and for whatever reason, they've got something else going on. They might have an emergency, but they're looking down. They're not even making eye contact because they're, oh my gosh, an emergency, someone's school just sent a message and they have to read it, but you've walked in at that moment and they don't make eye contact. You add those little things up, they feel like, you know, this person feels like there's too much going on. They're overwhelmed with something else. The employee that's walked in thinks, that person won't even look at me. They won't talk to me. You know, so these little things build up and you don't feel valued. So for me, ultimately, the whole lesson is about what do we do to drive those sort of elements of it's the little things that counts. You know, I would say confidence, communication are at the center of all of that, you know, where these days there's a big focus. And I talk about several examples in my book of how, you know, quite often you feel like you're the odd one out. And that is linked to diversity in many ways, but also inclusion, you know, feeling the odd one out. We all have, you know, I define minority as being more textbook definition of minority. Minority to me isn't just gender. It's not just ethnic minority. It's if you are in the lesser of any situation. And the reason I say that, Rita, is because this book is for everybody. Mm-hmm. You know, I don't want leaders picking it up and thinking, gosh, well, I'm back. Yes, well, actually, because at some point you may have walked into a barbecue and you're a vegetarian, or you might, you know, be somebody who casually happens to be of a certain religion, but you walk into an Orthodox celebration, or you're just not dressed for the right occasion. We've all done that at some point, you know, so at that point, you feel like the sore thumb out. You are in the minority, and that feeling is what drives this whole conversation. And we've all been there in various spectrums. So it's understanding those feelings, what drives, makes you kind of more empathetic to think, gosh, what did I do? Did I get really anxious and nervous and say the wrong thing because I just felt weird? Or did I deal with the situation and sort of just go straight in there? So it's things like that, these little nuggets of life, which actually equips all of us to react differently to these situations. Mm-hmm. And how we react comes from earlier in life. You know, there's a chapter in my book called The Rules of the Playground. And I talk about this starts right from childhood. I observe my kids, you know, when I run around, or I did certainly when we were in the city, and they fall down. When do you get back up versus when do you call for the teacher? When do you give up the swing or the slide? You've been coming up and down so many times. Can't you see there's a line behind you? You know, so it's things like that, learning to read the room, that social interaction, being likable without making an effort, just being a people person comes through practice, comes naturally to some. Some people look at things and practice skill sets later on, but it's all of these nuggets that make an absolute difference later on to this whole chat, this whole area of DEI that we look at.